Good afternoon, everybody. This is a live briefing as a strengthened tropical storm Fred is now making its final approach to landfall. Looks like it's heading very close to the Apalachicola area. Earlier, as it was wobbling northwest and then making that turn off to the north, it looked like it was going to head a little bit closer to Panama City Beach or even Mexico City Beach. But the good news is that anywhere to the west of Apalachicola, you have largely offshore flow out here that extends all the way up to Panama City Beach, especially up near the Destin area. Hardly even getting in to that rain action. There, even a little isolated supercell here just blew by the Apalachicola area. Carabel has a little band, a convective band here of supercells coming onshore. And then another dominant outer band of supercell storms here up in the Florida Big Bend region, moving east to west. Definitely some supercell structures up there. And you can see this bit of an eye wall structure as well around the center of the strengthened tropical storm Fred. That convection that was close enough to the center this morning, including two well-defined convective bursts there of hot towers that were basically in the western or northwestern eye wall here of the center. Those released plenty of latent heat. They did their damage. They resulted in those low-level surface pressure falls as we got down to about 993 millibars. And I do think that the intensity has leveled off, and here is the reason is that it looks like the highest echotops, the most intense convection, has propagated away from the immediate center or that immediate eye wall here, which is right around that donut-like center. You can see this really tall, hot tower here. Maximum latent heat being released by that storm has migrated off of that immediate eye wall, and now it's just a little bit to the northwest, but that's the main inner core of this hurricane. And the good news is that west of Apalachicola, largely offshore flow, should be able to dodge some of the worst storm surge, especially in the Panama City area up there. And the worst storm surge is going to be Apalachicola and off to the east through the Florida Big Bend, where a 2 to 4 foot surge is possible. And that's where you're getting all of that onshore flow there. Big onshore flow piling up that water into the concave shoreline here in northwestern Florida. And it does look like this tropical storm is going to make landfall right at Apalachicola. We can loop this radar here. I would suggest a blast off to the southeast there would be in order. The noob chaser there right here is heading off to the northeast. He's sampling that offshore flow out there. Seeing a little bit of damage there around Mexico Beach. But really, you got to get to where onshore flow is happening to experience those worst impacts. I would say Carabel right now is probably one of the most storm surge prone locations throughout Florida, off to the east of Apalachicola. The good news is that you are largely going to get offshore winds here, but it looks like there is just a little bit of a wobble due north, and that would bring the center in just to the west of Apalachicola. You'd have all onshore flow there in Apalachicola to Carabel area there. A lot of storm surge as well with this scenario. There you can see the center. It does look like that eye wall is starting to lose its convection a little bit. This higher echo top used to be right along the eye wall, but it's kind of been shot outward a little bit. Now it's a little bit decoupled from the immediate eye wall core there, reducing the amount of latent heat contributed pressure falls right near the center of this storm, but the damage has already been done earlier, intensifying this storm. So we do have that clear slot that is also eroding convection along the eastern part of this tropical cyclone, and that clear slot has likely now overspread the center of this tropical cyclone that is leading to a weakening of that eye wall around the immediate center as well. But you definitely need to head off to the northeast. That noob storm chaser up there in Mexico Beach is definitely going to be getting some offshore flow. They're just there because it sounds familiar from Hurricane Michael as well. But that offshore flow is going to lead to a reduced storm surge up there near the Mexico Beach area. The key to chasing these tropical storms and really sampling the worst impacts is to get to that location where it's predominantly onshore flow. And that's going to be happening from Apalachicola off to the east. You can see some of those southerlies there to the east of that immediate center. Basically, the eye wall there on the eastern and southeastern semicircle of the storm is not even convected. Basically a squall, but that's the strongest winds from a ground relative standpoint, with the storm moving off to the due north at about 10 miles an hour, you add that 10 miles an hour to the eastern side, and so you'll have to add to those 60-mile-an-hour winds. Might even push it up to 70 miles an hour, almost to severe thunderstorm strength in gusts. And it is possible that the tornado threat could get a little bit higher too, as this clear slot is eroding the eastern and the southeastern semicircle of this tropical cyclone. That mid-level dry slot that's going to overspread the Florida Panhandle could cause just a little bit of an increase in those surface temperatures, a little bit steeper, low-level lapse rates as well, and that could increase the tornado threat just a little bit between Apalachicola and up to Tallahassee as this thing comes ashore. Let's take a look at the latest Hurricane Hunter aircraft data here as well. It's good to see that storm chaser Corey working hard out there to make a name for themselves out there in the Florida Panhandle, chasing down this tropical storm. So here is this mission that is currently in progress, and it has shown that the pressure has definitely leveled off near the center of the storm, and it does look like that mid-level clear slot that is kind of overspreading the center of the storm is leading to those surface pressure rises. And we did see that hot tower, the hottest tower there, or at least the most effective latent heat releaser, migrated a little bit northwest away from that inner eye wall. So the latest Hurricane Hunter aircraft data is suggesting that the pressure may have leveled off just a little bit. So that is some good news. Definitely some big time winds though being sampled up there. Flight level winds in excess of 65 knots. So definitely a high-end tropical storm. Surface pressure holding steady at about 993 to 994. 60-mile-an-hour maximum sustained winds. A storm surge as well expected of about 2 to 4 feet. Maximized near and just to the east of that center. And it is remarkable how great the HWRF did at depicting the evolution of the structure of this tropical cyclone and wrapping in those hot towers leading to surface pressure falls. The HWRF did overdo a little bit the rate at which that hot tower would intensify it, but you can see near about 1,000 millibars, convection starts to wrap into the center, and then one of those hot towers grabs hold of the center, and it's able to wrap around the western and the southern side there. And then eventually that clear slot wraps into the eastern side, and that kind of levels off the intensification trend, removes those hot towers a little bit away from the center. So that mid-level clear slot was a little bit underestimated by the HWRF, or else we'd be talking about a minimum pressure of sub 990 millibars up into the 980s, and the HWRF actually intensified it into a Category 1 hurricane there. A little bit further west of a track than it is taking right now, so the HWRF was a little bit off here, where the actual center of the storm is actually a lot closer to land, closer to Apalachicola, just a little bit to the west of Apalachicola there. But then the tornado threat's going to ramp up, and I think that's especially going to ramp up tonight by about 7 to 10 p.m. Southwestern Georgia. You kind of have this dominant band of supercells from southwestern Georgia into the southeastern corner of Alabama, northeastern quadrant of this tropical cyclone there, and definitely maintains itself as a pretty robust surface low lifting off to the north-northeast. Heavy rain threat also could see several inches of rain, up to 6 to 8 inches of rain along this track here in the Florida Panhandle up into southeastern Alabama, southwestern Georgia there as well. But pretty remarkable at how these smaller scale, higher resolution hurricane models are able to depict the evolution in the structure of this storm on the mesoscale, and even smaller than that, with those storm scale hot towers there developing very close to the center of the storm and actually wrapping all the way around that center. So the good news is that hurricane reconnaissance aircraft is showing a level off of that pressure fall. That is certainly great news. Let's take a look at visible satellite imagery here and see if we can see any more fine scale features associated with Fred. This is on the wonderful tropicaltidbits.com website. I do wish I was out there deploying the Surgeonator sensors in our network of subsonic sensors to really monitor the infrasound and also the very sensitive high resolution pressure data inside of these storms. That recent tornado up I guess as far as southwestern Wisconsin there is a great example of what the subsonic sensors would definitely be able to measure. We'd be able to measure the really fine scale pressure fall, and we saw that incredible video from Scott Peak out there that showed that suction vortex right near the ground, that little flare up of condensation as you got a little pressure fall, and almost like turning an on-off switch. You turn on and then off the switch, you had a tornado's roar there, sounded like a really loud waterfall getting turned on and then instantly getting turned off as you had vortex breakdown, and the inability of a vortex of that size and intensity to maintain cyclostrophic balance for much longer than just a few seconds. So you turned off that pressure fall, had vortex breakdown, and then bam, you lost that roar. So it sounded like a on and then off. And the fact that it was really quick like that led many to believe that there might have been velocities inside of that tornado that exceeded the speed of sound. But in my opinion, I don't see any evidence directly of a sonic boom there or of those velocities exceeding sound. I do see evidence, though, of a very quickly forming subvortex and then a quickly dissipating one, leading to the on and off of that roar in the audible frequency. But if you had a really sensitive microbarometer like the one that we deployed on the Benjamin, Texas tornado back in April that was an EF3, you could also see that on-off switch. But in that case, it was as the tornado was on its closest approach to the subsonic sensor. So I wonder if in time we'd be able to see that on and off, and rather than the tornado passing by its closest approach to the subsonic sensor, it would be more of the tornado forming and then dissipating really quickly in a matter of seconds there. But I still do believe that the velocities and the really small spatial and time scales probably did approach the speed of sound, even with that relatively quick tornado, but I didn't see any direct evidence of that happening from that video. Just an incredible video from close range with that rapid condensation pop. And here you can see the clear slot wrapping around and almost exposing the eye off to the southeast. You can definitely see it here on satellite, high resolution satellite. You can see that convective burst kind of shifting to the northwest of the center. Must be starting to experience that southerly wind shear. You can almost see it in the high clouds here getting sheared off to the north. Look at all these clouds. And notice how those anvils are streaming from south to north there, kind of suggesting that wind shear that is starting to ramp up from south to north. And that's starting to expose the center on the southeastern side. That clear slot is wrapping off to the north. Apalachicola likely starting to see some brightening of the clouds despite that center passing very close just to your west. And as that clear slot overspreads the land, could lead to just a little bit of an increase in the surface temperature, which could lead to an increase in that tornado threat. And we can look at the real-time wrap here to kind of see if that cape axis is still materializing. And it looks like it's getting occluded and pushed off to the east a little bit. Notice how that cape isn't getting pulled into the center. There's a lot more cloud cover associated with this eastern and southeastern side of the circulation. Even though that mid-level clear slot's coming in there, still a lot of cirrus. Keeping that instability axis just a little bit removed from Apalachicola and the Florida Panhandle. But notice how as we step forward in time, that cape axis tries to migrate inland a little bit. You get a little blob there of 4,000 cape as that clear slot kind of dominates the center of the cyclone. Still, it wants to maintain a coastal front there right along the Florida Panhandle, but look at that robust convection developing in the Florida Panhandle, moving into southwestern Georgia. Those are likely all supercell storms moving off to the northwest in the northeastern quadrant of this tropical cyclone. So I do think that those will certainly have tornado potential. As that clear slot wraps all the way around the circulation, I think that it could even get more robust, including overnight tonight. But look at that wind shear, that blob of wind shear that evolves from the Florida Panhandle, starting at about 4 p.m. Central Time, and it really expands into southeastern Georgia through 23Z. That's through 6 p.m. Central Standard Time there. And that is also as that cape axis tries to migrate from south to north through the Florida Panhandle, increasing those surface temperatures just a few degrees and tipping the scales a little bit towards surface-based instability and the potential of tornadoes there. Southwestern Georgia into the Florida Panhandle. So moving forward with time, you can certainly see that the tornado threat is going to increase over the Florida Panhandle between Apalachicola and Tallahassee, and also southwestern Georgia, up near the Albany, Valdosta areas. Looks like we also could get quite an increase in that tornado threat moving forward with time. And this thing is coming ashore. It's going to be making landfall here shortly. This is the radar loop. Looks like it's trying to wobble back a little bit to the west again. But the key to chasing these tropical storms out there, and look at this, it's shedding some more convection off to the northwest. It's having that convection, and those hot towers are having a harder and harder time staying anchored within that eye wall, but you still do have this eye-like feature. You're starting to get some showers cut across that eye a little bit as the storm seems to be having difficulty maintaining force balance just a little bit with that dry air wrapping around the southeastern side. But it is a lot more robust than many of the models were showing yesterday and the days before. And you can see all of these southerly bands of showers here lighting up even beneath that mid-level dry slot. That's where the biggest storm surge is going to happen. It looks like it's going to be near Apalachicola and off to the east. We'll get the very worst of the storm surge. That's where the onshore flow is going to happen. You definitely want to concentrate on where that onshore flow happens, because the conditions are going to be a lot worse right along the immediate coastline, where you get that unimpeded flow off of the open Gulf of Mexico. That's also where you're going to get the biggest storm surge of 2 to 4 feet, Apalachicola, through the Carabel areas, through the Big Bend region of Florida. And look at these little bands of supercell storms. They haven't been able to trigger a tornado warning just yet, and a lot of that is because of the low-level stable layer, and most of that cape beneath this mid-level dry slot has so far been able to remain offshore with kind of a coastal front type feature that is setting up here. But this tropical cyclone moving northward, looks like it's putting on the brakes a little bit on approach to Apalachicola. I bet this thing wobbles back to the right a little bit, and somewhere between Port St. Joe and Apalachicola, looks like it's going to get landfall. But when you're covering these tropical cyclones, it's not about getting in the very center of circulation and sampling that modest pressure fall down below, just barely below 1,000 millibars. It's all about getting just near into the east of center, where you get that onshore flow to really document the absolutely worst and most life-threatening conditions with a tropical storm such as this one. Basically, when this band right here meets up with the shoreline, and that's probably going to happen near or just to the west of Apalachicola, that's when the worst storm surge is going to happen there. And I know from experience, by covering many tropical cyclones in the Apalachicola area, that's a very storm surge prone zone. There are a lot of inlets that come into the water, even though you do have that barrier island out there. Hardly a barrier out there. It's also a water spout prone zone where you will get a lot of converging sea breeze boundaries out there and a lot of stretching of vorticity when you don't have a tropical cyclone out there to disrupt the formation of those fair weather water spouts. But this is your classic landfalling sheared tropical cyclone. Most of the convection is on the north side. You'd think with that southwest to northeast oriented wind shear that would put a lot of the convection on the eastern side of the storm, but interestingly, those hot towers have been able to expand, and most of the wind shear is actually from the due south, and you can definitely see all those anvils from the convection getting transported off to the north with this storm. But it is coming in to Apalachicola here, northwestern Florida. Hurricane Hunter aircraft have shown a leveling off of those pressure falls. Minimum pressure is at about 993, 994 millibars as it's coming in. I think that it's reached peak intensity. It's probably leveled off, but still the impacts are going to be what they are. And that's going to be a 2 to 4 foot storm surge, some onshore flow, some gusty winds, and those conditions will be the worst. Apalachicola to the Carabel area with largely offshore flow up here. Port St. Joe, Mexico Beach, up through Panama City Beach there. Even though you are getting some of these squalls a little bit, and it might look like it's bad, with that offshore flow, that's a good scenario there to avoid much of that coastal flooding near and just to the west of the center. The worst of that coastal flooding and the storm surge is going to be Apalachicola, Carabel areas, anywhere near and just to the east of the center, where you get a lot of that onshore flow. That's where it's going to be the worst. And this thing is coming onshore. Reach peak intensity likely when it bottomed out at about 993 millibars. The H-Wharf, a little bit over aggressive with intensification, but really incredible handling of the evolution of the inner structure of this storm on approach to western Florida here. So I'm going to keep you updated with these live streams. And as the tornado threat evolves through the afternoon and the overnight hours, I'll be doing these lives through the evening and overnight tonight. I'm thinking about chasing flash floods in the monsoon for a couple of days out in Utah. And then I'll head back and meet up with Sasha and Critter to try to turn Dominator 4 into a submarine and gear it up to chasing Tropical Cyclone Grace, which is at risk of completely dissipating by the mountainous terrain of Hispaniola. It was just a tropical depression, basically a tropical wave yesterday, but it does look like there is a consolidated center that's very close to that southern coastline of Hispaniola. But many of the long-range models still intensify it just after it passes the Yucatan, very close to Cancun, and then over the Bay of Campeche in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, with a lot of that very warm water concentrated over the western Gulf. Many of those models do take it back up to hurricane strength on approach to northern Mexico or even South Texas there. So we'll also keep an eye on Hurricane Grace. And then I'll have the Dominator weather station on my roof as well. So that'll be great news that in time for the next tropical cyclones, we'll be able to measure that really high resolution research grade data here. And you can definitely see the mid-level dry slot starting to erode many of the squalls and the heavy rain out of the Apalachicola area. But after that happens, that's because of that clear slot kind of eroding the southeastern semicircle of this tropical storm. But once that onshore flow happens and that gets anywhere close to the coastline, that's when those 2 to 4 foot storm surge is going to come ashore. That's a life-threatening surge there, everybody, near Apalachicola and just off to the east, Florida Big Bend. That's going to be the worst of that storm surge. And I'm going to keep continuing to go live here as this thing approaches the Florida Big Bend, about to make landfall probably the next 3 to 4 hours here, maybe a little bit less than that, but it does look like it is putting on the brakes just a bit on approach to land, while at the same time starting to encounter some increasing southerly wind shear. So thank you, everybody, for staying tuned to my weather reports. I'm going to keep going live throughout the afternoon, evening, and even the overnight tonight as that nocturnal tornado threat evolves.